We're all hanging out under this huge umbrella, like, let's party. But the A-spectrum, all of us under the umbrella, don't fit into one glass. Hello lovely humans, welcome to this space on the internet. It's almost Christmas, which is why I have Christmas attire on. I like these earrings. They make like jingle sounds, which happens to trigger a bit of a tick in my shoulder for me, which is sort of funny. But anyways, Merry Christmas. Today I'm going to be talking about the real meaning behind the word spectrum, especially as it relates to A-spectrum, as in asexual and aromantic spectrum identities and the spectrum in general. Here at Spacey Aces, we've been making content about the asexual and aromantic spectrums, but I want to investigate what exactly spectrum means when it comes to asexual and aromantic identities. So what I'm going to be talking about basically comes down to these principles of, first, asexuality and aromanticism are not quantifiable. Second, asexuality and aromanticism are not one, but rather a vast array of different experiences. And three, someone's asexual and aromantic identity can be composed of numerous, infinite different components, factors, and experiences. So these three principles basically come together to form the concept of diversity within a community. And that's what spectrum means. We're all on the A spectrum, but we have a variety of different things that means for us. Let's talk about some preconceived notions about the A-spectrum. Oftentimes it's pictured as a line, so like over here we have allosexual and over here we have like fully asexual, and like it's a matter of severity or something, and as you get closer to the allo side you become more sexually attracted to people. Like, it just doesn't really check out in every sense because there's a lot of different facets to like asexuality, or this could be the aromantic spectrum right here too. Yeah, it just doesn't super check out. Of course, this conceptualization of the A-spectrum will work for some people, but it also sort of implies that like the only measure of asexuality or aromanticism is a matter of like severity or amount. Like, you don't have an amount of asexuality, that's not a thing. You don't have an amount of aromanticism, that's not really a thing. And that sort of concept can be used to underplay the reality of people who are on the spectrum as opposed to on one extreme of it. So spectrum identities, like being demi-romantic or gray asexual, among many others, are going to be seen as like lesser or like less A-spectrum, which isn't necessarily a thing, though some people may consider themselves like very much in between the two in a way that's conceptualized very well by the spectrum of a line, but that's not the case for everybody and can lead to some forms of exclusion. It's not a competition. We're all A-spec. Let's work together, guys. So, I'm suggesting an alternative look at the A-spectrum. Someone who's on the A-spectrum is not more or less A-spec than any other given A-spec person. And I have an example here in Glennon Doyle's memoir Untamed. She conceptualizes sexuality and gender identity as being like glasses, all containing various amounts and different colors and different shapes of like water and liquids and such, and being allowed to mix and match, and it's just all about diversity. Not being forced to fit within one static identity, but rather being able to be fluid, which is great. The future is fluid. The quote goes, "Sexuality is water. Sexual identity is a glass. We created these glasses to try and contain uncontainable forces. Then we said to people, pick a glass, straight or gay." So folks poured their wide, juicy selves into those narrow, arbitrary glasses because that was what was expected. Many lived lives of quiet desperation, slowly suffocating as they held their breath to fit inside. This applies to all sexualities, of course, and I think the A-spectrum in particular because it's such a broad spectrum. It's such a broad umbrella identity. Like, we're all hanging out under this huge umbrella, like, let's party. But the A-spectrum, all of us under the umbrella, don't fit into one glass. The A-spectrum isn't one shape of glass. It rather consists of an infinite array of different identities and different glasses. And, of course, the possibility of there being no glass at all to contain you. The one unifying factor that keeps us all in the A-spectrum is feeling little to no or otherwise irregular sexual or romantic attraction. And that's it. That's the only common thing we have in our glass or lack thereof. So let's talk about some contributing factors to what your A-spec identity looks like. Now that we've established the A-spectrum as unlimited you know? Untamed, like Glennon Doyle's memoir. Let's cover what makes different aspec identities different from one another. So all of us experience little to no sexual or romantic attraction, but from there, what's different about us? For example, you can have different orientations. So we know that there are many different aspec identities, such as like gray sexual, gray romantic, demisexual, demi-romantic, free sexual, free romantic, so on. And beyond just A-spectrum orientations, people may have multiple orientations within their main orientation. For example, some aces will have an allo-romantic, meaning they do experience romantic attraction, and some aromantics will experience sexual attraction and be allosexual, but some will be both asexual and aromantic, or on the asexual and aromantic spectrums. Your coexisting orientations, whether they're very oriented, meaning that they have different prefixes, such as demisexual biromantic, or peri-oriented, meaning they have the same prefix as in gray sexual, gray romantic, is one way aspec identities will differ from one another. Similarly, whether you identify your other forms of attraction, such as in the case of being an oriented aro-ace, like myself, that will differ from one person to the next. One other thing that can be a varying factor between aspec identities is your attitude or feelings towards sexual activity and sex. So, as I've discussed before in other videos, you can be sex favorable, sex neutral, sex averse, or romance repulsed, romance neutral, romance favorable. How you feel about those concepts can be a part of your identity and how you experience them. Another thing is touch aversion. So some asexuals and aromantics will be touch averse and not like being touched or not be a very physically affectionate person. Others will be highly physically affectionate and touchy and anywhere in between beyond, and that's another thing that can factor into how you sense your own identity and how you go about living as the identity that you are. Another thing is trauma and averse experiences. So some people's aspec identities will have to do with sexual or romantic related trauma or negative experiences, and others' aspec identities will exist independent of any traumatic experiences, depending on the person, on the aspec human. Everybody on the A-spectrum will have different relationship desires. Some will feel drawn to romantic relationships, other sexual relationships, some will be monogamous, polyamorous. Some won't want any romantic or sexual relations or relationships. Some will only want sexual relations and not relationships, if that makes sense. Or some will want queer platonic or otherwise non-conforming relationships. It goes on forever. There's an infinite number of relationship types, and some people will have a desire for different sorts of relationships and relationship dynamics. Some people on the A-spectrum will be interested in having many friends, even if they don't want a sexual or romantic partner. Some will not be super interested in having many friends, and that looks different for everybody. Some people may be content with and longing for like long-term relationships. Other people might be more happy with short-term relationships. And all of these relationship desires can be influenced by someone's aspec identity. Another thing is neurodivergence. Someone's neurodivergence, whether that be that they're on the autism spectrum, that they have ADHD, they have anything in this funky brain of theirs, that can influence how they experience asexuality or aromanticism. One more thing is sexual or romantic experience. So some people in the A-spectrum will have lots of sexual or romantic experience, others will have none. Some will have some. These experiences will all look different. And finally, someone's personality can factor into how their aspec identity looks. So whether someone's like introverted or extroverted, or more a spontaneous type of person, or more of an uptight planner type person, or whatever, can factor into how they experience their identities, because it's all happening in this one brain, you know? And we all have different brains, and that's super cool. And all of these are just examples. Literally anything can factor into your aspec identity. All of these things will vary from one aspec person to the next, and will affect their identity in varying capacities. So, in conclusion, my friends, so like Glennon Doyle advises against, I have tried to contain uncontainable forces in a video and define them, which can't be done because, like water, sexual and romantic orientation and identities are fluid and ever-moving, ever-changing, and I probably can't even begin to understand, let alone communicate all the complexities of the A-spectrum. But here I am, I tried. And the bottom line is, spectrums are composed of many different facets and colors and mediums of reflection, and spectrums are rainbows of unlimited colors, you know? thinking about the infinite diversity within the asexual and aromantic communities and queer populations in general that have existed in the past, exist now, and will continue to exist if we're not all blasted to pieces by some climate disaster, you know, thinking about that diversity is incredible. Sorry, I'm having a hard time forming sentences with my head brain, you know, mouth thing. I only have like one more sentence in my script though, so we're good. But I hope I've helped you to better understand the concept of spectrums and the aspectrum, and maybe even prompted you to appreciate the beauty that lies in diversity. Thank you, lovely humans. It's all on spectrums. Not a line, I don't think. Spectrums are infinite. We love spectrums. That's my catchphrase now. Thank you for watching. I love you all. Check out our new Instagram page if you're into it, or our TikTok, which apparently we have. What? Are we social media people? I seriously didn't get social media until like a year ago. I was that kid that that didn't have social media, but here I am, and here you are, and that's amazing. We have like a little community here, and I'm so excited about it. Love you. Bye.